Look, thank you so much for joining us today. As we start, can you talk a little bit about your background? What's your current role? What's in your purview?
Yeah. First, thanks for having me. And yeah, my background is before I was at Lightspin, where I'm currently head of marketing. I was at a company called HackerOne, so crowdsourced security, kind of doing bug bounty and penetration testing at the crowdsourced scale. And I worked up my way from the marketing role to head of community. So I left there in 2021 as VP of community and joined Lightspin just after that.
Awesome. It's interesting. I saw that in your background. You have experience with the community, as you said, content. So you have this advantage of having sat on many different chairs. So, and as you can imagine, cybersecurity kind of as an industry has exploded in popularity, and there's so many more people who are either maybe at more junior level who are looking to make a career in cybersecurity marketing, and or maybe they're a SaaS company or technology, but they're looking at cybersecurity as a growing field and they're looking to make a transition. To those who are just either starting or looking to make a career in the space, from your vantage point, what will be some of the suggestions? What are the top 2-3 things you wish you focused on more back in the day?
Okay. Yeah, I think what's always served me well, I'll start there, is just been the natural curiosity and hunger to learn. So I think anybody that is really interested in, cybersecurity is so incredibly broad. So as you pivot between where your kind of niche is, but then you can expand quickly from there. So if you think cloud security is a growing space, then you kind of align yourself to, hey, I want to learn more about this. If you're interested in some more of the traditional areas within cybersecurity, then that can also be a great career path. But I think if you're just hungry to learn and understand what your skills are, so just how you represent yourself, where your strengths lie, and where these future employers you might be looking at, just like any job, they're going to be looking to help you to help them get to somewhere where they haven't been before, or to make them more efficient, to round out their team. So I think there's a lot of trends, and that can be like a good place to spend your time, is learning more around how does artificial intelligence work within cybersecurity. Sure, everyone's kind of should be doing some element of that, but I think in your career arc and your trajectory is understanding kind of I always tell my team is like, what is your 3 to 5 year outlook, and work backwards from that. Like, do you want to go down a really technical path and be more of an individual contributor? Well, that's a very different way I, as your manager, can help you. Or if you want to be me in 5 years, that's what I told my boss when I joined HackerOne. I was like, hey, I want to be you in 5 years. Help me get there. And so I would encourage people to look at it that way too, is, hey, what's my 5 year outlook? Not just what's right in front of me and how do I get this job? What am I curious about? What's the growth path in these certain industries? And how can I be uniquely qualified to round up my skill set? Take other courses. There's a bevy of information that's out there, whether it's like a Maven type of thing, or a masterclass, or other online certifications that are available, especially through like the cloud service providers like Amazon, has a really great and a lot of free value and or subsidized value that you can do if you show that interest. It's way easier for me as a hiring manager, or for someone else that, if you want to be a more technical role, if they can see the proof points and they see you're leaning in, you're interested, your MBA or your undergraduate degree or CS degree will only get you so far. The on-the-job training, the on-the-job experience, what you've done in clubs, what you've built, what you've written. I think there's no better thing you can do in your career than actually articulate yourself in your own blog and write. That's my own perspective, because you're just like working out your own thoughts there too. So it just is an artifact that you can provide to others and help. So that's my last point I'd make there.
Certainly. Well, I think it's such a great frame. Find a role model that you want to emulate. And as you said, I want to be you in 5 years. And then I think it would be so endearing if you just approach that person and say, hey, I really like what you do. I want to kind of grow into that role. I think they will feel extremely flattered if you just approach them and you're halfway there in securing them as your mentor, and just figuring out what is that you did that got you to that position, and how I can do the same and maybe faster. Or
yeah, so that's a great point. And their success is your success, and vice versa, right? Like, if I hire someone and they do really well, that looks great on me, exactly. And you say, hey, I want to be really good at my job. I want you to help me. And then, they should be pushing up their managers to that next level. I think it's just a symbiotic relationship that a lot of times gets looked at in a very one-sided way, but it should be a partnership and a collaboration that, I think great leaders will already pursue that with you
Certainly,
and
certainly.
early on in your.
Certainly, and I think especially given that it's, as you mentioned, it's such a multifaceted area. There are so many things that can, so many rabbit holes you can tumble into, and just finding someone who actually a real person and just figuring and seeing yourself being in that role in the future, I think will make a lot of sense. You mentioned something about certification. Do you think it's important? And I'm kind of hearing different perspectives on this. If you're in cybersecurity marketing, is it important to be technical as well, just kind of to be able to understand the product, or is understanding the problem landscapes would you think would be sufficient?
Yeah, I think it does depend on your role, but for sure, Misha, it will never hurt. So, my first job in cybersecurity was actually at HackerOne doing content marketing, and I hadn't had exposure to the hacker community, hadn't been in cybersecurity really at all. So I just had to immerse myself. I had to just dive right in, and a lot of it is, I knew the patronage opinion leaders within a brief period of time. And I had my internal technical subject matter experts that I would be like, hey, here's what I read. Here's what I'm thinking. This is what I think it says. Is that right? And so I would just evolve and I would iterate quicker. And so if you could be a curator of knowledge and find, it's still, even though cybersecurity is big, there's probably 5 to 10 bloggers and content creators that are doing an outsized percentage of the actual like consistent content in the space. And there's others like yourself that continue to grow. And I think that's amazing. That's a great thing to be a part of. But if you look at the Daniel Mieslers and in the AWS space, you have, Last Week in AWS from Corey Quinn, you've got TLDRSec by Clint Gibbler. Like these are areas where if you're early in your career and you just read them week in and week out, you will quickly accelerate your learning. So my joke was, I'm not a hacker. I can play one on TV. So I can get the lines. I know the context, right? But I'm not a trained, hacker. I'm not trained in cybersecurity. I had to learn. So I've taken some of my own, like just edification and courses around cloud security and cloud in general. But I don't think it's worth my time as an executive or as a leader to go that technical at this point in my career. But in order for me to be able to communicate and articulate my value prop, to understand the needs and pain points of my buyers and my users, well, you better have an interest and a passion. You don't have to be technical as they are, but you need to have empathy and understanding and show that you're putting into cycles. If you read and you keep your pulse to the ground, that actually has value. So one of the first things I did at HackerOne was I took that curation exercise and I said, I'm going to write a daily newsletter. And I just started doing it internally at first to like employees. And then we expanded to do it external. So I was able to take that learning path and get more value out of it. And then I was the curator of the curators. From there, the conversations I would have in person at tech conferences was like, oh, that's really cool. I really liked how you're showing activity highlights in the feed and HackerOne's recognizing my work. So that was just a way that I personally was able to take my own background, which was not technical, especially in cybersecurity, and just trying to level up quick and then just lean in. A lot of these people that do the incredible technical work, they don't have anybody championing them. They don't feel like people are reading their incredible, impressive report, especially from like CERT or other like, industry groups. Like they're just like, oh my goodness, somebody really cares. And they're actually interested and they're reading it and they're asking me questions. So that's my encouragement there is you don't have to be technical, but I do believe you have to have a passion or an interest in it. And then, come with a hunger to learn and ask a bunch of questions and iterate quickly.
For sure. I think empathy in general is just such a underrated aspect of the job. It's just trying to understand what other people are dealing with, what their life is like, what they care about, what their passions are, what they're afraid of. It's everyone is so kind of
on an individual level, right? But also on the job level, because there's so much noise in marketing in general, but specifically in cybersecurity, we all start sounding the same because there's a lot of like overlap in these pain points and problems. So if you can be really articulate and really clear, that comes from a strong empathy. So like the end user, the CISO, the end buyer, like just an intimate understanding and consistent dedication to customer interviews and user interviews and reading what they're reading and talking about what they like to talk about, you're going to start figuring out where you stand out apart. And that's going to be a constant thing no matter what. What do you do? What pain point do you solve? Who do you solve it for? And how are you different than the competition? Those are basically top 3 questions you should have pretty much locked down, because the who you do it for matters a lot for your business growth, right? We're responsible for the growth trajectory of the business in a way alongside our sales counterparts on the go-to-market side. Are you going to go after SMBs, mid-market, enterprise? Are you going to go after a certain vertical? Like why and why not? these are conversations that are board level on down, that as a marketing leader and positioning, you have to be have a strong opinion. Now, strong opinion is loosely held, but you have to have data, and you have to say, hey, here's the direction we're going and why. And that's a big thing, especially for early stage startups, less so in bigger companies, but for any product to be successful, finding that beachhead, finding that growth, and then from there you can expand.
For sure. Well, I kind of understand, as to your point, understanding who you're talking to, but also how you're different. Because if you're trying to be better than, I know, some of the bigger players, it's a losing battle, but being different in a unique way and have a unique point of view, I think will go a long way. Now, switching gears a little bit, it seems like if you look at not just cybersecurity market, but marketing landscape in general, every year or so, there is kind of a new theme. At one point, it was all about inbound. HubSpot pioneered and captured everyone's attention. It was such a big deal. And then people realized, oh, that's great, but only a fraction of a percent actually convert. Then it was all about, I know, face-to-face experiences, RSA, Black Hat, and it worked well, but it's very expensive. And again, not your ICP, not all of them will show up, and not all of them will stop by your booth to have a conversation. Then it was with COVID, it was webinars. Then it was, I know now it seems like ChatGPT captured everyone's attention, whether it's content or automating outreach and kind of crafting email sequences and things like this. So there's always, I don't know if it's a shiny penny or whatnot, but I think it's always kind of a moving target. It's always kind of a new shiny tool that everyone wants to add to their toolbox. For you right now, what's working for you?
Yeah, I would throw in another trend, but I'd say has been working. It's product-led growth, right? So it's a different variation kind of that inbound model, but you're focusing on putting the product front and center, giving users immediate product value, and giving them a free version of your product that they can use for a longer period of time, and then you're able to grow from there. So the PLG motion at Lightspin has actually been a key differentiator. So we differentiate not just on the product core value, but on the actual go-to-market. So we're giving opportunities for cloud engineers to use Lightspin early on in their journey for various use cases. And we have what I call engineering is marketing. And that again takes a very strategic approach, because you're putting in R&D, expensive R&D investments into creating free value, free tools. It's not just all open source, but it can be free tools. As long as you start creating this map of where your user journey looks like. How do we grow them into maybe even a paying customer, or maybe they'll be a free customer forever, and that's fine. At some point, they're going to matriculate onto another role, and they're like, hey, we really like Lightspin's suite of tools and products, et cetera. I didn't use the core product in my day job, but now I'm ready to be able to expand. So those are kind of planting seeds for long term. So the PLG side is a channel that's working. I would say all the different channels you mentioned, you have to have a cocktail of those, and it really depends on what your channel mix is for your target persona, right? And then testing and iterating. Events are really expensive to test. So that's a benefit you get when over time, when you're like, oh, I know that event, that's not going to be the right fit for us. But you kind of have to make those investments early on as VP marketing, or you do your own event. Like, so last year for Lightspin, we ran something called Purple Cloud Summit. We didn't get a booth at RSA. We did our own, content. We got speakers, we got space, we generated that content. It continues to provide value for us in free user signups, not just the day of event that was like, instead of come to our booth, come to this event. So I think you got to find that mix that works. And, when you're looking at maybe $1 million budget for an early stage company, like you're going to spend 30-40% of your budget on events. Well, you got to know what that return is and what you value. Are you growing the brand or demand or both? And what do you and your executive, leadership and the board value now to be able to prioritize those channels? So various aspects. Webinars have still consistently been successful for us. And I think the events are really hard to always get the immediate value unless you can go bigger and it's a bigger brand play. But what we did, one thing that I will say a trick we worked well at Black Hat is we actually reduced our initial booth size, because we were still early on in our journey. We could be in the innovation city. So it's the minimum you need to get to be able to spend the money on like digital ads. You can't do like a virtual booth or a virtual experience unless you have some sort of physical footprint. But we had like 2 to 3 people came. We had a tiny little booth in the innovation city, but we drove thousands of new contacts to our database that were relevant for us to retarget and market to through our virtual experience and other ads. So that's how I'd say, like, you can look at an event. It's not just a playbook where you have to go big and toe to toe with maybe your more well-heeled competitors, which is Lightspin's story. We have billion-dollar companies that have raised way more money. We can't compete head to head. It just doesn't make sense. We have to be scrappier. We have to think of different ways to even utilize that channel to get more value.
Interesting. So it's almost like you're backdrafting of a large event, but you create your own experience and you drive people to that.
Absolutely. Because the physical part, the in-person conversations, you still need to have those. Your salespeople are going to be hungry for it. They need to be there. You need to have at least some presence, and it makes it look like you have bigger presence than you do when you have more virtual and targeting, like IP targeting or geofencing for certain ways that you can communicate to people. It makes it seem like you're bigger. Ideally, if you can get some of your SMEs on stage and presenting and you have that, that's awesome too, because you're not paying for those. That's an earned reward. So we had like our tool recon.cloud was in the Black Hat Arsenal exhibit that we applied for. And that's just all tools and practitioners. You literally can't mention your brand. You just say, here's a free tool for the community. And it's, you have a technical person that's doing a demo. We had like, I was there, like 100 people just sitting around. And then like 5 people came up after with business cards and was interested in the broader conversation. So I think those are just some tactics that work well for us, at least in terms of the physical event footprint. And then finding those different ways you're generating meetings in terms of lower funnel aspects. You know, we've worked with groups, Course Network or different ones that you pay higher for a lead, but you're going to get potentially some really relevant conversations, and you pay for performance more than you just have to go to maybe an event that's somewhere in some mid-market city that it could be a hit or it could be a miss. I've had both.
For sure. But it sounds like the common thread in what you're saying is find opportunities where you can get, go wide and test on a small budget, but then
early on. Yeah,
early on, but then
rely on your team to be able to make those decisions quicker. Because you as a leader in marketing, you're going to have to make those bets and convince your board, this is the channels I'm going to do, and here's what the return is going to be. You know, we are responsible for driving pipeline. It's not just growth anymore. In the last few years, everything is shifted. You talk about shifts. It's LTV and CAC and your efficiency in those channels, right? So you ask what's working. It's not just working for growth. You actually have to, make a more of an articulation for an efficient growth. And that's one of the biggest challenges we face.
Right. And as you said, I mean, you find opportunities where you get most leverage, where you for every dollar you invest, you get the lift. You invest in a smaller footprint, you get your toehold at Black Hat, but then you get way more mileage than some of the bigger, more better funded brands potentially, but they're just not as scrappy and as optimized and as kind of forward thinking, or trying to create a virtual experience in addition to the physical experience. It makes a lot of sense. You mentioned PLG. I think it's definitely one of the topics that are top of mind for so many people right now. And I think the conversation and sometimes the argument that I hear is that it definitely there was a number of very successful success stories. Probably Figma is one of the not in cybersecurity, but the PLG story, nevertheless, successful examples where this motion was very well executed. Some of the arguments, a little bit of a pushback that I'm hearing people are saying is that not every product lends itself to a PLG kind of motion. You really need a very wide potential pool of potential pool of clients, number one. Number two, your product needs to be a spectrum where you can dial back and forth, where you draw the free versus paid line. So there are certain prerequisites for a successful PLG motion, and that's kind of the pushback. Again, I don't have a dog in this fight, but what's your perspective? Do you think any company can potentially leverage PLG as their go-to-market, as one of the ways they go to market?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, because I think as the kind of like conversation du jour in some ways, like everyone thinks they can do it and everyone has their own definition of what it is. So even defining our terms for, like, you could have product-led sales or product-led growth that can be a hybrid. So even Sneak is a great example of what I would say in the cybersecurity space of, what I would say developer-led and product-led growth. They got an enterprise sales team pretty early on in their journey. So it's going to be a both and, not an either or. You have to check product-led growth products by design should have a great user interface, and they should be easy to use and quick to get value. If you can't figure that out, and that's a moving target even within the Lightspin ecosystem, like I said, we have other free tools. If you're not going to connect your cloud account, you're not going to get that aha moment of our core product value. So we have to get you there with other ways that aren't just like typically like a Dropbox or the Figma example, right? That's a much easier consumer driven, and then eventually they'll figure out the enterprise. But I do think every company should be considering and looking at ways that your product can be front and center, and that the value is easy to understand and easy to grasp. If you can get that in an experience way that's really optimized, and you got data-driven decisions there, then I think it really can be just this massive accelerant. When you look at the bigger companies that can be disrupted by these innovators, even like, why didn't Google go out and create the much better AI experience? Well, it wasn't even the technology. They have a vast amount of better data and technology than OpenAI does still. But OpenAI created an interface and a user experience that just exploded to get to 0 to 100 million users in 2 months. It took Instagram years to do that. It took Facebook 10 years, right? Just incredible. So I think every leader and like, we got to figure out, okay, what does this mean for us? Doesn't mean we got to go and change everything, but I will absolutely say it is not just something that product has to do, or marketing, or engineering. Sales has to be involved too. Like CS, if your organization is big enough to have a customer success organization, there's a great kind of graphic I would always share internally that shows this, like when a user's onboarding experience, and there's like this pink triangle where we highlighted everything. That's where every single one of those departments I mentioned have some sort of activity or conversation or connection. So every user that comes in, we shouldn't pass them straight off to a salesperson, because that's going to turn them off. They need to have a technical person. They need to get to more value, and you move that monetization line further down. So it should be acquisition, engagement, retention, and then monetization, and then expansion. So figuring that out is very unique and case by case, but I think everyone should be looking at it and thinking it or considering it, but it is not for the faint of heart. You do have to make concerted investments. Otherwise people say, well, we tried PLG and it failed. I was like, well, did you really? Like, it's not like you can't really dip your toe completely, but even, you can't just dip your toe in and then say, well, I tried it. It does have to be a pretty big,
well,
we're gonna do it this way. Retrain.
Yeah, well, it's a commitment. It sounds like it's not something you can spread as a thin layer of PLG on your dysfunctional company. And
I think you can try and do both initially. So that what we're doing at Lightspin is we're growing the PLG piece as a future promise, and that's a bigger thing. But we still have top-down sales motions to be able to drive pipeline and revenue, because that's really where more of our economic buyers and where they're familiar and comfortable buying today. But then eventually we've had those where it's like the end users are there, and now we're able to talk to them 6 to 9 months later. But the typical life cycle of an enterprise deal is 18 to 24 months, sometimes like maybe 12 to 18 months, but you're talking the larger check sizes. So if you can help get that faster, because you have end users in your product are getting value within your ecosystem, and you inform sales with that strong data, they can then do a better top-down outreach and even an outbound channel with the SDRs or BDRs to have more articulate conversations like, hey, did you know 20% of your engineers in this group are using our free tools to be able to improve their daily lives and their job? Do you want to learn more about what we can do if you expanded that full purview? So,
well, it's totally, it's like you have a platoon of ambassadors already embedded in the organization you're trying to sell to.
It's a dream, right? It's a dream for market. That's why everyone's like, oh, how can we get this?
Totally. Well, it's interesting that as you were talking, I just remembered someone quoted, I'm not sure if you follow him, Naval Ravikant. He said something along the lines, and I'm butchering the quote, but he said, well, you find yourself selling, but the truth is you're selling because you can market, and you find yourself marketing because you suck at product. So essentially, kind of to your point about OpenAI, I memean, they took the tech that Google was sitting on for years, really, and they created a consumer-facing product. And it's amazing, and it's spreading like wildfire because they did something that they had the wherewithal and the vision and the why and the unique point of view that they acted on and other people didn't, even though they could have. Yeah, amazing. So look, last question. I know we're kind of up on time. You have a crystal ball, and you can look in the crystal ball and see the future. And then in that future, cybersecurity marketer 6 months from now, 12 months from now, maybe we'll be obsessing about what 3 things?
Yeah, obsessing about, I mean, I think we'll be obsessing about pipeline, because that's always front and center for particularly B2B SaaS. I think we'll be assessing still about efficiency, but there's going to be more and more pressure on growth. And I think we'll still be obsessing around people management, hiring and firing people. So those are the 3 that I think are probably, even if it, no matter what's happening in the macro environment, to me, those are probably the 3 that are top of mind all the time. You could maybe add in a 4th bonus one, which is like, we're still going to be talking around, machine learning and AI and what that means for us. And is it buzzword? Like, does, is it all sizzle or more steak? Like what do we make of it within our own product units, and how do we articulate it? Because I think there's just so much kind of noise out there. So in general, that kind of comes into the positioning element, but I think that's the current trend. It was crypto blockchain a couple of years ago. PLG still is hanging around, but you can't, even coming out of RSA a few weeks ago, like everything was AI this, AI that. It's really everywhere. And there's some exciting companies like Hidden Layer that won the RSA Innovation Sandbox, which Lightspin was a finalist on last year as well. Great ML product in the security space. So yeah, my buddy Hiram just wrote a book for Robust Intelligence in the ML security space. So I think you're just gonna see more and more of that.
Awesome. Well, this is very interesting. Hopefully we'll be able to connect 6 months from now and see where we'll land on those,
I
those
love
different dimensions. Look, thank you so much for your time. This was awesome. Where can people find you? What's the best way to connect?
Yeah, no, I'm on LinkedIn, Luke T. Tucker, and at Twitter, Luke Tucker, or luketucker.com is where I blog and have my my writings.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thanks.